Thank you very much. And yes, Nick DiVigilio is our chairperson. Our vice chair is Helen Koki. Our secretary is Pam Antala. Our project manager is Curtis Ross. I'm treasurer. And Gerhard has done work for us. Thank you very much, Gerhard Randall. So the presentation I have, parts of it I'm going to go through relatively quickly because most people in the room, I think, are familiar with the history, the need, and everything else of the project. So there was a housing shortage identified for people who are 55 plus. We have the 15 units at Rotary Place, and then there's 10 that the province has, which are a three-story walk-up. The province put out a request for proposals. We submitted a proposal, and we were given conditional approval. In the meantime, the Lions Club donated a huge chunk of land worth $300 and some thousand. The city of Thompson added to it so that we could park. We acquired an architect, McGinn and Associates, through Kirkona. We acquired a project manager who is Curtis Ross, and without Curtis, we probably would be still in the water. The project was tendered, and it was tentatively awarded to a local contractor. I have to use the word tentative and conditional an awful lot because that's where we're at still, but I'll explain why this is very soon to end, this tentative stuff. Okay, so why do we build it? Right now we've got 3 and 4 generations of families, grandpa, daughter, granddaughters, and so on and so forth. People wanting to stay here. It's important to keep the seniors in Thompson. This sounds like a horrible thing to say, but you know, if you want your economy to be productive, you need to keep your seniors here. They're the people who have the money to spend on grandchildren and everything else. The parents are too busy trying to raise the families and everything. It's the grandparents, and if you go especially to southern Manitoba and you look at the communities who are thriving right now, they have huge, huge populations of seniors. And currently there's no new, modern, aging in place spot for people to move into who are 55 and plus. By aging in place, I'm sure that Pam, who's with the Seniors Resource Council, can explain the details better. The only way that I understand aging in place is with my hands now, I'm really appreciating lever style handles. So that's one very small example of what this would be. So some of the benefits are, this will be a co-op housing model. If you're not familiar with the housing co-op, you purchase shares to move in. Those shares are held for you. They're 100% refundable when you decide to leave, or unfortunately, if you pass on, it's paid back to your estate, all right? You don't gain interest on it, but you're always guaranteed your equity. And then that also provides the co-op with some money to leverage further funds. You have, by it being a co-op, you have the opportunity to be on the board and have a say in the operation. No snow to shovel and reshovel it again. No grass to cut. None of those things. Somebody will look after that for you. If you're a snowbird, you want to take off for a month or 2 months, you don't have to worry about somebody coming in and turning on your taps every day and making sure that everything is good, because it's in a nice, secure building. You won't have utilities or taxes to pay because that will be incorporated into a monthly housing charge. And as I said, it'll be a secured complex. Some of the features, I talked about aging in place. I talked about the lever handles, the walk-in tub, the wider doorways. There's actually going to be 6 units. I don't know if it's in here. 6 units that are designed for people who have to live in their wheelchair. So those will have lower counters and everything else that's required for people who are not as mobile. The in-suite washer, fridge, dryer, and stove will be there for you. It'll be individual heating and cooling, so you don't have to worry about your neighbors and what their temperature is set at. An elevator, of course. There'll be a heated, secure storage area, and you'll have balconies with each suite. So, how come it's, it was cut off on the original too, and I forgot about that. We tried to do a comparison of what it would cost to live in our housing co-op versus staying at home. And I'm just going to go straight to the bottom line. You can save $346 a month. If you're living on, if you're, no, I'm sorry. Yes, you save $346 a month living in a housing co-op compared to looking after your home. That's after taking into account mortgage, hydro, property taxes, water, sewer insurance, lawn care, snow removal, maintenance, basic, and alarm or security. We can share this PowerPoint with you later if you wish, or the actual numbers that we have somewhere. Curtis has them. But there is definitely a cost saving. But I think more importantly, there is the physical saving. As you get older, things get harder and more taxing, and it takes longer to recover from them. So the architects that we have employed have done a similar project in Dauphin. We wanted you to have a look at what they did there so that you'll know the quality of what we're building here. And maybe Curtis, would you like to speak to the visit
Sure.
with Dauphin?
Yeah, we went through the Dauphin property, and it's an identical structure that we're looking at building here. It's the same architects as Penny had mentioned. The only difference is you'll notice this is kind of set up on a 3-story scenario. Ours is a 2-story scenario. Again, it's a cost and supply and demand. Ours is based on a 30-unit structure. This was a 42-unit structure, I believe, in Dauphin. Which I always find surprising because, I mean, if you calculate their draw and their areas and their aging population, and you look at our areas, it's no difference in the amount or quantity of people we draw upon. There was different styles of kitchens. And what was nice about it, what we, myself, Nick, and A&B Builders was the tentative builder. I'll throw that out there. We went and toured the property. There was optional items, like you see this one here has an island. There are some buy-ins that can affect the cost of your suite. If you don't want an island and mobility is an issue and you need the space, as opposed to that, you don't have to have the island. It's an optional thing, and we're looking at those within our structures also. What was nice is, you got a feel when you walk through it. The hallways were wider. There was chair rails down the hallways. There was handrails down the hallways. There was a little exercise room and it was just in one of their vestibules on the 2nd floor. It wasn't a dedicated exercise room. And the problem we had as we developed and went through these, the many drawings and versions of this was, you start off wanting everything, but it comes down to affordability because this building is designed on affordable rents, and those are controlled by Manitoba Housing Renewal Corporation. So that pretty much dictates what we can afford to build and what we can afford to sustain over a long period of time in the cash flow. So there's certain areas we have to shrink down. The common areas, still a nice sized common area in this, but some of the spaces had to be tightened up. And this is kind of our version of that same building. We didn't give up the balconies, we've straightened out the roof line a little bit on the final version. Just again, a cost thing, every time you add a dormer, a gable, a valley, you got maintenance issues, you've got all these things. So on our final version, there is a bigger gable there, a straighter roof line with one big gable as opposed to all those little sub gables. But the balconies remain, the pillars remain, the little storage areas that are going to be on each level remain. And very nice structures. This is just a layout of a 1-bedroom suite. So your option is a 1-bedroom suite or a 2-bedroom suite. And the buy-in that Penny mentioned, that is the shares that you buy in depends on the type of suite you want. And what were the 2 buy-ins, the final sets on those?
For the 1-bedroom, it's 60 shares of $1,000 each, which is a $60,000 buy-in. For the 2-bedroom, it's 70 shares at $1,000 each for a $70,000 buy-in. 100% refunded to you at whenever you move or whatever.
Yeah, so what that buys you, people say, well, why am I paying $60,000 and $70,000 up front? What it is if you want to get rid of your house in town and move in, but in a case, let's say you're a single person and you have a fixed income and you're below the threshold, and there is a threshold that you have to meet, and I think it's about $54,000 or just under shy of that annually of income, then you can step into this, but the rents are fixed by MHRC. And that's the nice part, because it's an all-inclusive rent, as Penny said. It includes all the heating, electrical. The only thing it doesn't include is your internet and cable. That's wired into the unit, but whether you choose to have that on your monthly bill, it's an individual bill at that point. But everything else, the common cleaning costs, the snow clearing, that's all included in the cost of that monthly rent. Oop, so there it is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh.
well, that's fine.
Okay.
Penny, you can talk a little bit what the process is for getting into this.
Okay, I can do that. So, in order to move in, we have to have an expression of interest. Now, originally, when we were speaking with mortgage companies, et cetera, we were under the understanding that we only needed 50% of, $500 deposit on 50% of the units to convince them there was enough interest. Well, that's changed a couple of times. Currently, they want 100% buy-in of the units. However, that's all is not lost. We do have a equity loan guarantee that's through the province that will offset that. So it's not crucial that the units are sold at 100% of the share price. What is very important still to the bank, though, is that we can get more of those units sold for the $500 deposits. We're halfway there. We need to sell another 15. So the process is we'd get Leanne Grenier, and I should point out Leanne Grenier, who used to be with the Thompson Housing Agency, has been a tremendous resource to us, and she has offered to continue to help us. So Leanne Grenier will contact you. There's a form to fill out. She'll explain all the details of the form. Write out a check for $500, and she'll tell you who to write it out to. It's held in trust for you, which means it's 100% refundable. And there's actually, I think, some interest in some people who say, well, I'm not interested now, but I might be in 5 years. Can I give you a $500 deposit and you just hang on to it until I am ready? And I say absolutely, because there will be other people who will be moving in the meantime and out. So anyways, so that's one thing that I would like to recommend to you, that you consider. If you think that by 2019 you would be moving out, ready to move out of your home and into something that's more compatible with the senior's lifestyle, that you consider doing this now, this deposit now. And the full amount of the shares is not required until construction actually begins. So us selling these $500 deposits is still very important to us obtaining our mortgage. And if you're wondering where we're at and being able to make an announcement, we are one box to check away from getting that mortgage. And that box is to show them that we have a sound plan to raise the remainder of what needs to be raised. Selling the other 15 units is no longer urgent, but it's still important. There are other ways that we can fundraise to make that up in terms of money. But in terms of the expression of interest, to give the bank the confidence, it's very important that we sell some more of those. Okay, forget the questions. A couple of the other things I want to talk, because we are very close to being able to announce that we're, what the construction date will be when it begins. As I said, there's one box to check off. And that's the fundraising part. So selling these units is one part. Another part is we have what we call Class B shares. Class B shares are $25 each. And they're really just an expression of community support for this project. So part of our fundraising strategy that we're going to submit to the bank to show them that we will be able to raise the full amount is to sell $5,000 worth of Class B shares. And that's only 50 people buying 4 shares each. So that's only $100 if you look at it that way. Your Class B shares will entitle you to a seat at the table, when there's board meetings. Because you're not a tenant, you won't have voting rights, but you would have the opportunity to speak and share your wisdom and opinions. We actually have copies of the application form for the Class B shares. Pam has them, and Pam even has a receipt book, so if anybody wanted to write out a check for 4 Class B shares today, we would be more than willing to help you go through that process. The other point to make is on the fundraising part of it. Thanks to the Thompson Lions Club, we continue to receive money from bingos through that, and will continue. And that is part of the fundraising strategy that we've identified, is that continuing income from there. But if there's any organizations in Thompson that will be doing some form of fundraising or polling of their membership or whatever they see fit, that would like to make a donation to the Lions Manor 55, we can give you a charitable tax receipt, because we're going to be going through a trust with the city. They have a trust fund, and so you'd get a charitable tax receipt from them. The Class B shares we cannot give you a tax receipt for, but any donations we certainly can. And now, are there any questions? We do have the floor plan up there. We do have a list of frequently asked questions to distribute, if you're interested. Dave?
Have you had any interest from out of town, like around areas? Like I know some of the outlying communities want to keep their family close, and a structure like this I think would be ideal for a lot of people.
We've had a couple of inquiries, but no commitments yet. Yeah. Danielle?
What happens if you don't have the ability, like you don't own your home, so you don't exactly have access to $60,000 or $70,000?
Okay, Curtis?
Well, it is a challenge.
We've discussed it before. It's just that Curtis explains it better than I do.
Well, the problem is we tried to fit this so it fit as many people as we could into the envelope, right? It's not going to be the project for everybody. Like, there are people that do not have access to $60,000 and $70,000. They may be able to get an equity loan through a family member, or a family member may put that up for them and say, okay, because it's guaranteed money. It's guaranteed that they will get it back if they're there. They'd have to be jointly on those shares, though, because there has to be some accountability to the whole thing. I actually had a question similar to that the other day. One individual asked me, he said, well, my brother would like to live there, but he doesn't have that amount of money to put up for it. And he says, can I put the money up for him? I said, yeah, there's probably a way and a mechanism that we'd work with Gerhard to, one, satisfy the Cooperative Act, because that's what we have to satisfy, and two, satisfy the legal requirements and liabilities that would be attached to it. So it's not to say they can't. The ideal situation is and I don't like to even use senior, that 55 plus person who's just said, I've had enough of snowstorms and shoveling and doing all the house maintenance and everything. I want to take off to a southern location for at least a week or two and not have to worry about the house, or I just want to go out to Paint Lake in the summer and not have to worry about whether I got security at the house. And they meet that threshold and they just want to get rid of their house and take that equity, dump it into here, and have that fixed rent. That's the ideal candidate for this person, for this place. We've got gaps on both sides, people that don't have the 60,000 or people that are just above that threshold, and we're trying to address that, but we do have criteria we have to meet through Manitoba Housing.
Yeah. So. In terms of that threshold, we've had a lot of questions about it, and we had a discussion with the province recently. It looks like there could be a softening of that. I don't think they would ever do away with it, but it looks like they might soften the criteria. So if you're close to the threshold, they might take that into consideration. Apparently was it Dauphin or Verdun? They had a situation where they had, 3 or 4 units that they couldn't fill with people who met the criteria. So they allowed the units to go to people who were not in that criteria, with the understanding that when those people moved out, then the new tenants would have to meet the criteria. The other thing to consider is that threshold goes up every year. The province sets what that annual income is, and so that goes up every year as well. So today it might be 54,000, next year it might be 55,300. It could go up. We don't know how much it's going to go up, but that does change from year to year.
It's definitely indexed. It's
Yeah.
like anything else. The rents are indexed. The rents go up every year, you know.
And we're only tied to this for 15 years. It might sound like a long time. Most people will be living there that long if they move in at 55 anyways. And after 15 years, then our obligation to the province would be fulfilled, and then we can operate the co-op differently. We can let people of other incomes come in, and we'll have more control over the rent and that sort of thing. The co-op will, so.
One clarification, that's 15 years, it's down to 10 years already on the letter.
Down to 10 years?
Yes.
I think it
One
was
already,
10.
yes.
I think, I can confirm that, but
Yeah,
it's an obligation on the funding model. They give you so much per suite,
Yeah.
and then you're locked in with MHRC for
So-
a period of time. And
So
I think
10
it's-
years is even better.
I think it was 10 years. I think they did reduce it to 10
Okay,
years. yeah,
okay.
so.
All right.
If you don't have commitment for all the units, would you consider somebody younger than 55?
We've talked about that, especially wonder if it's a couple moving in and one's over 55 and one's under. I think it's something that would probably have to be discussed on a case-by-case basis. But as from the way our discussions have gone to this point, I would say there's room for that discussion. Can't give you an answer for sure, but I would say there's
Gerhardt's-
room for that discussion.
Gerhardt's
Oh,
got his
Gerhard?
hand.
A good point, that's a good point. One thing that they might consider is if there's a vulnerability there that person has, other than old age, then they might consider if the person's disabled, for example.
Okay,
That might put them in a category where they would consider that,
okay. Did you hear-
for one of those special units.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're welcome.
Paulette? Or-
How do you guarantee somebody a suite 5 years from now?
On the waiting list.
You
Let's
don't-
go.
Yeah, you don't. It's just
Yeah.
to get your name on the list.
It's to get your name on the
yeah.
waiting list, yeah. Because if you don't have the $500 down, you're not on the waiting list.
No, I get
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Love to be able to say you have a suite. It really is a first come, first served basis, or you move out and a suite becomes available and your name goes to the top, then you're there. And you're gonna find, and I always say there's 3 stages to these projects. I've done something similar to this in the past. There's the people that will put the $500 down and they're committed to the project day one.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Nick and his, family members such as that say, we want in, we want the project, we like it, we're in. And then there's going to be the person that sort of sees the structure go up, they start to see the windows go in, there's a little bit of excitement on it, you get another 3 or 4 come in and buy. They start to see that. But the last 5 units or 10 units you're going to sell, in Thompson it'll probably be 10, is the person that wants to come in and open the drawers and open the doors and everything. And then those 5 or 10 are going to go like that because they're going to realize what this is and how this works. And if you have a chance, go see one like one in Dauphin, and even Murray Bennett, who's a builder and has built lots of things in this town. He was totally amazed at how it was built, how it functions, and how comfortable it is, and how happy everybody was in it. It was just a different atmosphere in the whole building. I don't have to shovel snow. It's snowing outside. I don't care. It's with no guarantees. It'll be first come, first serve, and it will go rapidly once it starts. So, yeah.
That's up to the board members to decide, the people who are going to be living there. At this point in time, we have no policy one way or the other. Same thing for smoking.
I will say,
That's
Dauphin, I asked the question when I was there, no pets, no smoking. And they've got a waiting list. So it's demographics and what you're looking for, and it's maintenance. She said, the lady looks after 3 other buildings. They have one of their buildings is pet friendly, and she says, it's tons more maintenance for me than it is ones without pets. And that's just the bottom line. She said, that's just the reality of it, so.
And that, of course, affects the bottom line to the cost of it and the monthly housing charges too. So,
As an example, with my old friend and her husband who happened to be over the 55 thing, I didn't really want to say that, could they purchase it and then let their old mother and dad enter the building until they were ready to use it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
That's
Probably, is what I'm gonna say is,
The shares would probably have to be somehow co-shared, right?
yeah,
Is what I'm, and it would be a question for Gerhard that we'd have to get in and look at what the legal obligation of the Cooperatives Act is, because we are a cooperative, so before, we're not gonna say yes one way or another, but it's a similar question to what you had. If you don't have the $60,000, and the question I had from somebody that said, can I put it up for my brother who's 55,000? You know, or 55 but doesn't have the 60,000, and it's the same question we'll have to come across. I'm guessing there is a mechanism in place for that. Yeah, so.
Because we've talked about it in other circumstances, so that would be a
But very good
similar-
questions,
yeah.
because it's one of those that's kind of neither this way or that way. Because it's the same thing for my mom, like if I wanted to have my mom stay in it, you know, but if she can't afford it, she meets the threshold for the income below that amount, but I couldn't see any reason. She qualifies in every sense of the equation, except for the deposit, right? So that would be me, so.
Yeah, does it really matter whose name the shares are in, as long as the person that's living in it can qualify to make the payment?
Well,
My-
we'll have to clarify
yeah,
that with Gerhard, because there is a
There will be a way to
legal and a
handle it.
liability
We just haven't
issue
figured it out
associated with that. You know, if the shares are in one person's name and somebody else is living there, then, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd have to make sure that's addressed, but.
Yeah.
I just find it hard to believe that it hasn't been all taken up already.
We do too, because a lot of people say they're interested, but they're not interested enough to make that.
What did I
That
say
little
about the
commitment.
3 types of buyers?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
gonna see the boards go up and the sign go up and the sticks come out of the ground, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden those 15 units that were left, there's only gonna be 5 of them left,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, you had a question? Well, it's kind of answered, but I'll throw it out there anyway. So if I wanted to buy one and own it, but I wanted to lease it out to my friends,
No, no,
okay? Okay,
Yeah.
just ask.
yeah.
It's
It's
kind of
a
the same.
primary residence, that's what it is,
Okay.
yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, we had that discussion actually at one point, so,
Okay.
that no subleasing or sub.
Because a question similar to that came up, Volker, and was somebody said to me, can I buy the unit and then allow somebody, or put up the deposit and allow somebody, so that shares would be held in their name, but I see a person in need in the community that I'd really love to be able to see live in this building. Could we do something for them like that? So the question was posed is if 6 of us got together and put $10,000 down and said, okay, we see this person really deserves to get a break in life.
Doesn't have the 60,000 equity
Yeah,
necessarily.
so those are still some things we're gonna have to figure out how to do, because to me, that's a qualifying person would be a good tenant, but just can't come up with the 60,000 you've mentioned. But that's the catch, we need that, it's a balancing act, you know, can you make that number low enough? And because, you know, somebody said to us, well, why don't you raise that 60 to 100,000 and 120? I said, there's a limit to affordable housing, you know, that rent, and we kind of we looked at what that maximum was, right? Minimum amount to get us the project going, maximum amount that people could still afford to buy into it.
So I apologize, I thought you meant like a subletting.
Well, actually,
Situation
I'm
as opposed
thinking
to-
if you're short, what
Yeah.
kind of creative options can you offer
Right,
out there,
yeah.
right? There may be somebody that says, okay, I think it's a great idea, don't live there today, I'll buy one and let somebody else live there for 2 or 5 years until I move in, if
Yeah.
it helps. So I'm not
Not sure what other kind of solutions are.
It's along that line, the same sort of thing we looked at 5 of us buying and donating it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another thought I had was if like 5 kids, each one would put in $10,000 to buy the shares in the parents' name or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, and it goes back to Gerhard, and we're gonna take this information, sit down with Gerhard again and make a list of this and try and synthesize it. My thinking is similar kind of scenario is it's a share help kind of situation, right? So you're looking at where my brother and I would get together and buy those, and my mom's name would be on the shares as well as ours, so the liability for the person living there is still there. But in trust, when that unit if it ever turns back, the money goes back to the people that supplied it, which would be in trust to something that
Or
the
one
individual.
that become-
Yeah. I think there's ways around that one, and we'll work with Gerhard on that, so.
So if the person, like say that did own shares and he willed and said that he wanted the his shares to be kept in family?
Yep.
Could the next family member move into it, or it would?
Well, there's, again, it's, you still hit that qualifying number, you know, and we'd have to look at that.
And the other thing is, we'll have to look at, double check through Gerhard the bylaws, because if I'm not mistaken right now, the way it's worded is the shares always go back to the co-op, and the co-op reissues them.
You can't will them to
Yeah,
anybody.
that's the way it
Yeah,
is.
and that's part of the Cooperatives Act, so,
But, you know, it could be you know, getting back to the $500 to secure the unit, it could be a simultaneous thing. So you buy in for your dad, right? At the same time, you and Earl put a $500 deposit, so you're at the top of the list. So when that unit becomes available, bang, you're right up there, right? So then internally, the shares just kind of, there are creative ways of, but it's, again, not to step on Gerhard's the lawyer here,
No,
so
that's
I'm not
okay.
gonna, but I
You're
think
doing
there's,
fine.
I think
tell
there's
you.
ways of working it, you just have to talk to them, so.
I have a couple of questions. One as well.
Sorry, time is up. No.
First, I'll start with a comment. This is actually an excellent project for Thompson. It fits right into the Thompson 2020 strategy. It's one of those buckets where they say to retain retirees in the community. And I'm surprised that it hasn't been taken up, but I can see why. It's because of the threshold. So talking about the threshold, is it the 54,000? Is it combined income of two individuals or one
household
individual?
income,
Household.
yeah,
So that's
Where the problem
so,
lies.
yeah.
The second question is, when is the completion date estimated?
It'll be 18 months to 24 months from the time we stick the shovel in the ground. If all goes well, and don't quote me on this and hold me to it, but it will hopefully be sticking the shovel in the ground by June 1.
You have to edit that part out of the tape. Okay.
So you start off with the $500. When is then the money supposed to change hands, the 60 and 7,000?
Once construction begins, according to our mortgage holder, lender, whatever they're called, the bank, we are supposed to then approach people and start in stages. So it would be $10,000 almost immediately, and then the balance before they move in. So
Prior to the end of
so
construction.
prior to, so actually very soon after, I would say within a couple of months after construction starts, we'll be having to contact everybody on that list and ask them to be making plans to free up that money for.
So it makes things a bit easy. You don't have to.
Come up with a lump sum.
You've got, you know, let's say you want to sell your house and you've got equity in the house. If you own it free and clear,
Right.
you can get a short-term loan on your house, right, to put those deposits on while your house is on the market for sale.
And to give you time to sell it too.
Yeah,
so
like there's
you don't have to rush
that's
into
kind of
it.
was designed, why it was designed like that. And again, we're kind of working, this is, again, it gets back to the affordable housing model. That's what this first model was for. It's not to say there might not be another phase to this project that might go outside of that affordable housing, but the very first phase for what the group was funded and applied for funding for was the affordable housing model.
My last question then, once
You start construction and you have people in, and you get this huge waiting list. Is there room for expansion?
Yes, there is, and we've talked about a few different options, although we haven't decided on any. But in all likelihood, what will happen once this is complete, I don't know my directions, but on one side of the building, there will be I'm going to call it a common area addition. It'll be used for whatever gatherings or whatever, a nice size. The phase after that would be the next version of 55 plus seniors assisted living, whatever you want to call it, and they would both join into that common area. So they would both have access to use that large space. We haven't had the discussions yet in terms of which direction the next phase should go, but we realize there's lots of options. We realize that assisted living is needed. We realize market-driven housing is needed. It's just a matter of let's get this one done first.
Yeah, it's kind of trying to get the first one, but it is a progressive design. you know, the foresight to the board is, okay, let's, again, not trying to be everything to everybody in the first stage of it, but let's plan this so that you can go from living alone to an assisted living, and that common area, like, it's more of a, it's not just a common, it's a common hall that could be utilized by the people in the building, but it also has some retail to the front of it, so there might be some services in there. If somebody wants to get a haircut, there might be a barber in there. So, you know, in the wintertime, when people don't want to leave their suites, there could be some personal service areas located within the front of that next phase. So, yeah.
Paula?
Another scenario.
Do you have an estimate on the monthly cost?
The unit, the monthly?
Estimate on the monthly fee?
Yes,
$939 was for the two-bedroom, I believe.
yeah, 939 and
$787.
787 or
We've got that. We can email that to
I
you.
can email that,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry.
It's a dual presentation.
Because it changes each year, you know, when we started off, the monthly housing charges were less, and those are set by the province. Those aren't we're not setting those, the province is setting
And
those.
they're usually indexed by inflation, whatever the province sets that inflationary, you know, to be.
Does a person qualify if the senior is bedridden or house-bedridden and one of their children would be a caregiver, and
Actually,
they'd be the second occupant?
we did have that conversation, and I believe the answer was yes. But if the
Oh, yeah.
senior person who's requiring the care passes on, that does not entitle the caregiver to stay if they don't meet the criteria. Okay? I believe this, are we?
Yeah, and a lot of these types of things can be decided by the board.
Correct.
Once it's, if the residents in the structure decide that's what they want to allow to have happen, to allow Mrs. Smith to have her daughter be her live-in caregiver, it comes to a vote to the board, they allow it, it can happen. These kinds of things can be worked out by the residents themselves.
And that's an important point that Gerhard just made is, and Penny had made it earlier, this is a cooperative. So the 30 people in that or the 30 residents in that collective building get to set some of the ground rules for how this place will be governed in the long term. So it's you know, for lack of a better analogy, it's like a condominium kind of group where you get a vote and say in what happens in and around it. So.
When you were talking about the 6 units that were wheelchair accessible, does that mean all the other units aren't accessible?
I think they would all be accessible in terms of the wider doors, et cetera. But they won't maybe have the lower counters and the other things that need to be changed to make it easier for a person who's always sitting and operating from a chair.
They're all barrier-free design.
Yeah.
That was one of the criteria of MHRC, that you had to, all areas had to be barrier-free.
Well, right, the
Yeah.
legislation's
Yeah.
there now where you have
Yeah.
to do that anyways, but.
Yeah.
But there are some specific things to those 6 units that are different from all other units, yeah, so.
So what would you think about building the whole building the same way, whereas if he moved in and moved out, I can move in. If he didn't have a disability or I did,
It comes down to
You know what I mean?
cost. It comes down to cost on some of the things, and it comes down to demand of what, not everybody wants the lower counter, or not everybody wants the higher counter. It's kind of, you're trying to, again, it's a balancing act of trying to meet everything, right? So, yeah. But, you know, the nice thing in the fit up is if we get, let's say we're building this and we've sold 15 units, and midstream, before we start to finalize all the orders on this stuff, if we find that we've got 10 people that need barrier-free access units, because that is fit up inside the structure, that's not necessarily things that have to be changed too drastically, we could possibly do that. You know, if the demand is there, we have the flexibility to change some of those amenities, so.
Ellen?
We're just about over time anyway, but Norm and I have our names in there, so our house is looking for sale, so.
Good plug, I like that, yeah.
Paula, did I get to you? Okay.
Hey, you know what, we'll close the formal part of the meeting, and you're here if anybody else has any questions, please feel free. So, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Very, very good.
Good job, Carol.
Again, thank you, everybody.